What if the camera saw something your eyes were never meant to? What if the camera saw something your eyes were never meant to? We trust photographs. We trust them in a way we trust almost nothing else in the modern world. More than memory, more than testimony, more than the account of a witness standing in the room when the thing happened. A photograph is evidence. A photograph is proof. When we say I'll believe it when I see it, what we really mean, in the age of the image, is I'll believe it when I see a photograph of it, because the photograph is the closest thing we have to objective reality, to a record of the world that exists independent of the fallible, selective, emotionally compromised instrument of the human eye. But what if the photograph can see things the human eye cannot? What if there are places, specific, physical, locatable places on the surface of this earth, that exist in the visible spectrum of light but not in the visible spectrum of human perception? Places that are technically present, technically illuminated, technically there, but which the human eye, for reasons no one has yet been able to fully explain, simply does not register? And what if a camera, a machine with no brain, no bias, no evolutionary history of filtering out what the organism doesn't need to survive, can see those places clearly? What if the camera has always been able to see them? What if we just never looked at the photographs closely enough? Nina Cross looked at the photographs closely enough. She had been looking closely at photographs her entire professional life, which is perhaps why she was the one who noticed. And perhaps why she was the one who went to find the place the photographs could see and the eye could not. She was never seen again. But the photographs remained. And in every single one of them, without exception, she is not there. Not absent. Not missing from the frame. Present in the image, fully, physically, verifiably present, but rendered as something the eye slides off, something the brain declines to process, something that is in the photograph the way a word is in a language you do not speak. Technically present, completely inaccessible. Until you learn to look. This is her story. This is the story of what she found. This is the story of the place that light can reach but eyes cannot, and of the woman who stood in it and looked back at us through a lens and smiled, and we didn't see her until it was far too late to do anything about it. Part 1. The desert that remembers everything. The Alvarez Basin is not on most maps. This is not because it is secret or classified or particularly remote. It sits in the high desert of New Mexico, approximately 40 miles southeast of the town of Rialto, accessible by a dirt road that branches from State Highway 41 and runs for 11 miles through scrubland before ending at a dry lakebed that stretches for perhaps 3 miles in every direction, flat and pale and absolutely still, surrounded by low volcanic ridges that give it the quality of a stage set, the sense that the landscape has been arranged for an audience that has not yet arrived. It is called the Alvarez Basin because a geologist named Hector Alvarez surveyed it in 1923 and filed a report with the New Mexico Bureau of Mines that described it as geologically unremarkable, a playa, a dried lakebed, alkaline soil, sparse vegetation at the margins, no mineral deposits of commercial interest. The report is 11 pages long and scrupulously dull, the kind of document produced by a man who was paid to observe and had the professional discipline not to interpret. But at the bottom of the final page, beneath his signature and his credentials and the date, Hector Alvarez wrote a single sentence that was not part of the formal report. A personal notation, small and careful, the handwriting slightly different from the rest of the document. Slower, more deliberate, as if he had thought for a long time before committing it to the page. The light here does something I cannot account for in my survey. He never elaborated. He never returned to the basin. He died in 1951 without, as far as anyone can determine, ever mentioning it again. But the sentence survived, in the archive of the Bureau of Mines, for 96 years, until a photographer named Nina Cross came across it while researching locations for a project on geological survey history and felt something shift in her chest, a small, precise movement, like a key turning in a lock she hadn't known was there. Part 2. The Woman Behind the Lens. Nina Cross was 37 years old when she disappeared, in the early morning hours of March 8, 2023. She was a photographer, not a commercial photographer, not a portrait photographer, not the kind of photographer who shoots weddings or products or the headshots of aspiring actors. She was a documentary photographer in the oldest and most rigorous sense. A person who pointed a camera at the world and tried to record it as it actually was, stripped of the flattery and the composition and the deliberate aesthetics that turn photography into art at the cost of making it less true. She had been doing this work for 12 years, since she left a position as a photo editor at a regional magazine in Santa Fe and decided, with the clean decisiveness that characterized everything she did, that she was more interested in taking the photographs than in choosing which ones other people had taken. She had since published 2 monographs, collections of documentary photographs from the American Southwest that had been reviewed well in the serious photography press and largely ignored everywhere else, which is the standard fate of serious documentary photography and which Nina had accepted with equanimity. Her work had a quality that critics struggled to name. The best attempt, made by a reviewer in a photography journal, was this: Cross's photographs feel like they are showing you something the world contains but does not usually make available for viewing. You look at her images of empty landscapes and you have the persistent, irrational, slightly alarming sense that the landscape is looking back. Nina had clipped this review and pinned it above her desk. Not because she was vain about it. She was not vain about her work or about much of anything, but because it was the most accurate description of what she was trying to do that anyone had yet produced. She was trying to make the landscape look back. She had been trying to do this since she was 22 years old and took a photograph of an empty field outside Albuquerque on a flat, bright, undramatic afternoon and saw, when she developed the image, that the field in the photograph was not the same field she had been standing in. It was the same field, same grass, same fence line, same water tower in the distance. But it was not the same. Something in the translation from eye to lens to emulsion had changed it. Something in the field that her eye had declined to process had been captured by the camera and was now present in the image, undeniable, though she could not have said exactly what it was. She printed that photograph in a large format and kept it for 15 years, looking at it periodically, trying to identify what was different. She never could. But she spent those 15 years trying to replicate the effect, trying to find other places where the camera saw something the eye did not, and this search was, in everything but name, the real project of her professional life. The Alvarez Basin, when she found Hector Alvarez's notation in the Bureau of Mines archive, felt like the end of that search. Or, as it turned out, the beginning of it. Part 3. The research. Nina was meticulous. This is the word that appears most frequently in accounts of her from colleagues, friends, the editor of her second monograph, and her younger brother Daniel, who was the person who reported her missing and who has spent the 2 years since her disappearance building a private archive of everything she ever produced, documented, researched, or touched. Meticulous. She did not go places without understanding them first. She did not point her camera at something without knowing what she was pointing it at. She researched every location she photographed with the thoroughness of an academic, producing folders of notes and historical documents and geological surveys and oral histories that dwarfed, in size and depth, the actual photographs that resulted. Her research file for the Alvarez Basin runs to 340 pages. Daniel found it on her laptop, a battered ThinkPad she had owned for 6 years and refused to replace because she had, over those 6 years, trained it to behave in exactly the way she needed. He has read it many times. He has made it available to investigators and researchers and, selectively, to journalists. It is a remarkable document, part geological survey, part photographic history, part something that has no clear disciplinary home, a record of a woman following a thread through archives and libraries and online databases and occasional field visits until the thread led her somewhere she had not expected and could not fully explain. The thread began with Hector Alvarez's sentence about the light. Nina tracked down everything Alvarez had ever written or published, which was not much. He was a working geologist, not a writer, and his professional output was practical rather than reflective. But she found, in a box of personal papers donated to the University of New Mexico Library by his family after his death, a series of photographs he had taken during his 1923 survey of the basin. They were on glass plate negatives, fragile and partially deteriorated, but enough survived for Nina to have them professionally digitized. She spent 3 days looking at the digitized images. At the end of the third day, she wrote in her research notes, "He couldn't account for the light because the light in these photographs is not behaving according to any optical principle I can identify. The shadows are wrong. Not dramatically wrong, subtly wrong. The kind of wrong that you could easily miss if you were looking at the images casually. But I am not looking casually." The shadows in Alvarez's 1923 photographs of the basin were wrong in a very specific way. They fell at angles inconsistent with the position of the sun at the time the photographs were taken. Alvarez had been careful to note the time of each image in his survey log, so the sun position could be calculated. The shadows were not random. They were consistent across all 17 surviving images. They fell as if from a light source positioned approximately 30 degrees off from the actual sun. A second light source, present in the photographs but invisible to the eye, casting shadows that the eye would not have registered because the eye did not perceive the source. Nina wrote, "There is something in the basin that emits or reflects light in the visible spectrum. It has been there since at least 1923. It does not appear to the naked eye. It appears to photographic film and, I suspect, to digital sensors. It has a specific position, northwest quadrant of the playa, based on the shadow angles. And nobody, in 100 years of that basin sitting 40 miles from Rialto, has noticed it. Then, nobody who was looking at the photographs was looking for it. I am looking for it." She began planning her field trip the following week. Part 4. The Journey. Nina drove to the Alvarez Basin alone on March 6, 2023, in her 12-year-old Land Cruiser that she had maintained with the same meticulous attention she gave everything she cared about, and which had never once left her stranded in the 12 years she had been driving it into remote southwestern landscapes. She had told Daniel her destination and her expected return date, March 10th, and had given him the GPS coordinates of the basin and the name of the state highway she would be taking. She had packed for 4 days, camping equipment, food and water, a portable solar charging setup for her equipment, and enough photographic gear to supply a small studio. The photographic gear is worth enumerating because it becomes significant. She brought 4 cameras, a medium-format digital, a 35mm film camera loaded with black and white film, a large-format field camera that required a dark cloth and a tripod and the kind of slow, deliberate operation that is the opposite of modern photography's instinct for speed, and a converted infrared camera, a modified digital body whose sensor had been altered to capture light in the near-infrared spectrum, just beyond the range of human vision. She brought 12 rolls of film. She brought 16 memory cards. She brought a laptop for reviewing digital captures in the field. She was, in the language of her profession, loaded for bear. Whatever was in that basin, she intended to photograph it in every available spectrum of light. She arrived at the basin on the afternoon of March 6th and made camp at the southern end, where the scrubland gave her some windbreak. Her first evening's notes, recovered from the laptop, which was found in the Land Cruiser, described the basin in practical terms. The light was flat and even, good for survey work, the temperature dropping fast as the sun declined, the silence absolute in a way that she noted was unusual even for the high desert. "The silence here is specific," she wrote. "It's not the silence of absence. It's the silence of attention. Like the basin is listening. I know that's not a scientific observation. I'm noting it anyway." She went to sleep early. She was up before dawn. Part 5. The First Photographs. March 7, 2023. The day before she vanished. Nina spent the entire day photographing the basin. She began at first light and worked systematically, using the shadow analysis from Alvarez's 1923 images to triangulate the position of the anomalous light source. She moved through the basin in a grid pattern, the same kind of systematic approach that Maravas had used in the Vermont woods, the same disciplined methodology of a trained professional who knows that the way to find something is to look everywhere, methodically, without letting excitement override procedure. By mid-morning she was in the northwest quadrant of the playa. Her field notes for this period are the most detailed in the entire research file. She was shooting continuously, medium format digital, film, infrared, working the light from every angle, reviewing the digital captures on her laptop between sessions. And what she found in the digital images confirmed everything she had extrapolated from Alvarez's century-old glass plates. In the northwest quadrant of the basin, something was casting shadows. Not a rock. Not a rise in the terrain. The playa was flat here, she had measured it, flat to within centimeters. Not the sun, which she could see clearly and which was positioned 60 degrees off from the shadow angles in her images. Something else. Something at ground level or just above it, approximately 4 meters in diameter, she could calculate the size from the shadow geometry, that was emitting or reflecting light at a specific angle that the camera captured faithfully and the eye did not register at all. She stood in the middle of it and saw nothing. She pointed her camera at the space she was standing in and the camera showed her something. "I am standing inside it right now," she wrote in her field notes, sitting cross-legged on the playa with her laptop open to a digital capture showing the shadows converging at the point where she was sitting. "I cannot see it. I cannot feel it. There is nothing here that my body can detect. But the camera shows me that I am sitting inside a 4-meter radius of something that emits light in the visible spectrum. Something that has been here for at least 100 years. Something that is, as far as I can determine from these images, completely invisible to the human eye." She paused her note-taking. "Then, I need to load the infrared body." The infrared images changed everything. In the near-infrared spectrum, the thing in the northwest quadrant was not a 4-meter radius anomaly. It was vast. It extended across the entire northwest section of the playa, hundreds of meters, possibly more, a structured, organized, geometrically precise pattern of light and shadow that was completely invisible in the visible spectrum and overwhelming in the infrared. Shapes. Repeated shapes. A pattern that was, unmistakably, not geological in origin. Not random. Not the product of differential mineral reflectivity or thermal variation in the soil. Organized. Deliberate. Nina sat with the infrared images on her laptop screen for a long time. The sun moved. The shadows shifted. She did not move. Eventually she wrote 4 words in her field notes. "Someone made this here." Part 6, the night before. She did not sleep well on the night of March 7th. Her notes from that evening are fragmentary, short entries, some barely a sentence, written at intervals between what was apparently a sustained period of sitting outside her tent looking at the basin in the dark. 10:17 p.m., the basin in moonlight. Nothing visible. But I keep looking. 11:43 p.m., reviewing infrared captures. The pattern is consistent across every image from different positions and focal lengths. It is not a sensor artifact. It is in the basin. 1:06 a.m. I think the pattern is a record. Not a signal, a record. Like a photograph. Like something made this impression in the light itself, and it has been here ever since, embedded in the way light moves through this space. A photograph taken by something that was here before photography existed. I know how that sounds. 2:34 a.m. I know what I need to do tomorrow. I need to be inside the pattern when the light is right. I need to let the camera see me inside it. I need to find out if the pattern responds to a subject. 3:15 a.m. going to try to sleep. The silence here is different at night. It is not the absence of sound. It is a kind of presence, like being inside a held breath. Last entry before sleep. I have spent 15 years trying to make the landscape look back. Tomorrow I am going to stand inside a landscape that I think has been looking back for centuries. I am terrified. I am the most awake I have ever been. She slept until 5. She was up before the sun. She was never seen again after that morning. Part 7. The photographs. This is the part of the case that stops people. This is the part that investigators and researchers and forensic photographers and perceptual psychologists have spent 2 years attempting to explain, and failing, and attempting again, and failing differently. When Daniel Cross reported his sister missing on March 11th, one day after her expected return, and when the search and rescue teams reached the basin and found her camp intact, her land cruiser parked where she had left it, her tent standing, her food and water and camping equipment undisturbed, and Nina herself nowhere, they also found her cameras. All 4 of them. The medium format digital, the 35mm film, the large format field camera, and the infrared body. All present. All with exposed media. The digital bodies with full memory cards, the film cameras with exposed rolls. Her laptop was open on the camp table, plugged into the solar charging bank, the screen showing a folder of the previous day's digital captures. The search teams found no Nina. No footprints leading away from camp in any direction. No sign of a struggle or a medical emergency or a fall or any of the 1,000 things that can happen to a person alone in a desert. She had simply not been there when they arrived, in the same way that a light is simply not there when you flip the switch and the bulb has burned out. An absence so complete it is almost aggressive. But the photographs were there. And when the forensic team processed the images, all of them, digital and film, visible spectrum and infrared, they found something that took 3 days to fully understand and has not been fully explained since. Nina was in the photographs. In 47 of the images taken on the morning of March 8th, the morning she disappeared, Nina Cross was visible in the frame. Not in the background, not accidentally captured in a reflection. In the frame. Standing in the northwest quadrant of the playa, in the center of the infrared pattern, her camera raised to her eye, photographing something that was apparently photographing her back. Except she wasn't visible. Not to the casual eye. Not to the search team members who looked through the images on the first pass. Not to the lead investigator who reviewed the card contents on the laptop screen that afternoon. They all looked at the images and saw an empty playa. Flat, pale, undramatic, devoid of human presence. It was a forensic photographer from the state police, a meticulous and experienced woman named Officer Rita Garland, who found Nina on day 3 of the investigation. She had been processing the images for inclusion in the case file, applying standard forensic enhancement procedures, contrast adjustment, shadow recovery, histogram normalization, and she was working on a medium format capture of the northwest quadrant, a wide shot taken from a tripod, apparently a compositional setup frame, when the shadow recovery algorithm pulled something out of the midtones. A figure. Standing in the center of the frame. A woman with a camera raised to her eye. Nina Cross. Present in the image. Photographing something. Perfectly composed. Not hidden, not obscured, not in shadow, standing in full desert morning light, as present and as physical as the playa beneath her feet. And utterly, completely invisible to the naked eye. Rita Garland called her supervisor. Her supervisor called the State Bureau. The State Bureau called, eventually, a perceptual psychologist at the University of New Mexico named Dr. Marcus Webb, who specialized in visual processing anomalies and who had spent his career studying the gap between what the eye receives and what the brain chooses to perceive. He looked at the image for a long time. Then he said, very quietly, "The camera saw her fine. Our eyes just wouldn't let us. Part 8. What Dr. Webb found. Marcus Webb spent 4 months with Nina's photographs. He is a careful and conservative scientist, the kind who does not make claims he cannot support, who does not reach for dramatic interpretations when mundane ones are available, who has built his career on the rigorous application of perceptual science to questions that other researchers sometimes treat too loosely. His report on the Nina Cross photographs, submitted to the New Mexico State Police in August 2023, is 61 pages long and written in the densely technical language of his field. But its core finding, stripped of the methodology and the statistical analysis, is this. The human visual system does not passively record what is in front of it. It actively constructs a representation of the world based on what the brain expects to see, what it has been trained to see, what it considers relevant to the organism's survival and functioning. This is not a flaw. It is one of the most sophisticated and efficient information processing systems ever evolved. The brain edits the visual field constantly, discarding irrelevant information, filling in gaps, smoothing anomalies, constructing a coherent and usable picture of reality from the overwhelming flood of raw optical data that the eyes deliver. The consequence of this efficiency is that the brain can and does edit out things that exist in the visual field if those things do not fit the brain's model of what should be there. This is well established. It is the mechanism behind inattentional blindness, the famous experiment in which subjects counting basketball passes completely fail to notice a person in a gorilla suit walking through the scene. The gorilla is there. The eyes see it. The brain decides it is not relevant and declines to surface it to conscious perception. What Webb found in the Nina Cross photographs was this. The northwest quadrant of the Alvarez Basin contained something. A pattern of light, an optical structure of some kind, ancient and organized and of unknown origin, that the human visual processing system was constitutionally unable to perceive. Not unwilling. Unable. The pattern fell within the visible spectrum, which is why the cameras could capture it, but it fell in some specific configuration of wavelength and intensity and spatial frequency that the human brain's visual processing algorithms systematically categorized as background, as irrelevant, as not a thing, and edited out before it reached conscious perception. And Nina Cross, standing inside that pattern on the morning of March 8th, had become part of the pattern. The camera still saw her. The camera, which has no brain and no visual processing system and no evolved tendency to edit reality for efficiency, captured her image faithfully, as it captured the pattern faithfully, because the camera does not decide what is relevant. The camera just records what light does. But the human eye looked at those images and did not see her. Because the human eye looked at those images and its brain said, background. Irrelevant. Not a thing. Until Rita Garland's enhancement algorithm pulled the hidden information out of the midtones and the brain was forced, finally, to process what the eye had been declining to surface for 3 days. Webb's conclusion, Nina Cross is in 47 photographs taken on the morning of March 8th. She is present, physical, visible to the camera, and invisible to human perception. She is alive and active in the images, in different positions across the frame, in different orientations, clearly moving between shots, clearly engaged with her own photography. The last image in the sequence shows her standing with her camera lowered, looking directly at the camera on the tripod, looking, in other words, directly at us, with an expression that Webb describes, in language that sits oddly in a forensic scientific report, as the expression of a person who has understood something that changes everything. After that image, there are no more. Whatever Nina Cross stepped into on the morning of March 8th, she stepped into it while we were watching, while the camera was watching, faithfully recording every photon, and we did not see her go. Part 9. The Single Print. 3 months after Nina's disappearance, Daniel Cross received a package at his home in Santa Fe. It was a padded envelope, standard brown, the kind available at any office supply store. It bore a Santa Fe postmark and a return address that turned out, when investigated, to be a vacant lot on the south side of the city. Inside the envelope was a single photographic print, large format, 8 by 10 inches, fiber-based paper, developed in a darkroom with the kind of careful chemical precision that is increasingly rare in an age of digital photography. The image showed the Alvarez Basin, the northwest quadrant, the playa stretching to the volcanic ridges beyond. Desert morning light, clean and horizontal and specific to the high southwest, the kind of light that Nina had spent her career chasing. The playa appeared empty. Daniel looked at the print for a long time, the way you look at something when you know you are supposed to see something in it and your brain is refusing to cooperate. He looked at it under different lights. He photographed it with his phone. He scanned it at high resolution. And there, in the scanned image, enhanced and clarified by the same kind of digital processing that had revealed Nina in the forensic photographs, there she was, standing at the center of the frame, camera raised, looking through the lens at whatever was in front of her, whatever existed in that basin that no human eye could see. Her posture, intent, focused, completely still in the way she was completely still when she was working, when the world had narrowed to the rectangle of the viewfinder and the moment inside it. She was there. She was present. She was working. And she was, by every optical and physical measure, exactly where she had chosen to be. On the back of the print, in Nina's handwriting, confirmed by Daniel and later by a handwriting analyst, one sentence. The light here has been waiting for someone to photograph it from the inside. No return address. No explanation. No distress. Just a sentence from a woman who had spent 15 years trying to find the place where the landscape looked back, written from inside that place, in the voice of someone who has arrived exactly where they were going. Daniel keeps the print in his archive. He looks at it every day. Every day, the part of the image his naked eye can access shows him an empty playa. Every day, when he looks at the scanned version, enhanced, he sees his sister. He told a journalist, in the only interview he has given about the case, "People keep asking me if I think she's okay. I think that's the wrong question. I think she's exactly where she wanted to be. I think she's been photographing whatever is in that basin since the morning she walked into it, and I think the photographs she's making are extraordinary, and I think someday we'll find a way to see them." He paused. "I just wish she could show me." Part 10. What the camera knows. There is a concept in photography called the decisive moment, a phrase coined by the great French photographer Henri Cartier-Bresson to describe the instant when all the elements of an image align, when composition and light and subject and meaning arrive simultaneously at a perfect configuration that the camera can capture and time cannot sustain. The decisive moment lasts a fraction of a second. If you miss it, it is gone. If you catch it, you have made something that did not exist before and will not exist again. Nina Cross spent her career hunting the decisive moment in a specific and unusual sense. She was not interested in the decisive moment of human drama, the kiss, the protest, the grief, the joy. She was interested in the decisive moment of the landscape itself, the instant when a place revealed what it actually was beneath its visible surface. The fraction of a second when the camera could catch the world being more than the world appeared to be. She found it in the Alvarez Basin. She found it in the most complete and literal way imaginable. She found a place where the landscape was always having its decisive moment, where the light was always configured in a way that the camera could see and the eye could not, where the world was always being more than it appeared to be, had been for at least 100 years, possibly for much longer than that, possibly since the volcanic ridges formed and the lakebed dried and the light began its long patient conversation with itself. In the flat pale space between. She walked into that decisive moment and the camera caught her there and the eye could not see her, and she sent her brother a print from the inside and wrote him one sentence about light. What does that mean? What happened to Nina Cross? The possibilities arranged themselves on a spectrum from the rational to the extraordinary, and everything on that spectrum is, by the evidence, partially true. Perhaps she became disoriented in the desert and wandered and died and was not found because the desert is large and search and rescue is imperfect. Perhaps the photographs are explainable by some optical phenomenon that perceptual science has not yet fully characterized. Perhaps the print was sent by someone who knew enough about the case to construct a convincing forgery. Perhaps everything has a mundane explanation that is simply waiting to be found. Or perhaps a woman who spent 15 years looking for the place where the camera saw what the eye could not finally found it and walked in and found, on the other side, a light that had been waiting for exactly her kind of attention. Perhaps the decisive moment she had been chasing her entire career turned out to be not a fraction of a second but a place, a specific latitude and longitude in the high New Mexico desert where the visible and the invisible overlap, where something ancient and organized and patient had been embedded in the physics of light itself and had been waiting for 100 years or 1,000 for someone trained and precise and obsessed enough to look at the photographs closely enough to notice. And perhaps she is still there, still working, still pointing her camera at whatever is in that basin that exists in light but not in sight. Perhaps the photographs she is making are the most extraordinary photographs ever taken. Perhaps we do not yet have the eyes to see them. The archive. Daniel Cross has built an archive. It lives in 3 fireproof filing cabinets in his Santa Fe apartment and on a 12-terabyte external drive that he keeps backed up in 3 locations because he is, in this way, his sister's brother, meticulous, careful, unwilling to let the record be lost. The archive contains everything Nina ever photographed, including the Alvarez Basin images. It contains her research files. It contains the large format print she sent him from wherever she is. It contains Dr. Webb's 61-page report. It contains the forensic images with Nina visible in them, standing in the pattern, working, alive. Daniel reviews the archive periodically. He is not morbid about it. He is methodical. He approaches it the way Nina approached her work, systematically, without sentimentality, looking for the thing that is there but hasn't yet been seen. He has not found anything new. Not yet. But he keeps looking because he is the brother of a woman who spent 15 years looking at photographs that everyone else had looked at and finding things that everyone else had missed, and he has decided to believe, with full awareness that this is a decision rather than a conclusion, that the same principle applies here. The thing is in the image. It is always in the image. You just have to be looking for it. He told the same journalist at the end of their interview. She used to say that a photograph is an argument that something existed, that every image is evidence, that the camera doesn't lie and doesn't editorialize and doesn't decide what matters. It just records what the light does. He looked at the large format print on his desk, the empty-looking playa, the morning light, his sister invisible to his eyes and present in the scan. She's in the photograph, he said. That means she existed there. That means she exists there. That's what she taught me. The camera doesn't lie. The pause. I just need to learn to see what it's showing me. Case file number 0112, status, open. Last known contact. Photographic print, received June 2023. Body, not recovered. Suspect, none. Nina Cross, age 37, photographer, remains missing. The basin holds its light. The pattern remains. Somewhere in 47 photographs, a woman is still working. We just have to learn to see her.